Hey everyone, welcome to Productive Creators Podcast, where we take a deep dive into YouTube channels. I'm Pat Gostek, founder of Clipgrove, a YouTube marketing agency, and I have a ton of experience reviewing channels. This is what we do, my bread and butter. If you would like us to review one of your channels, let us know in the comments. Comment down below your YouTube channel name, and we will make sure to include it in one of the next episodes. I brought, as usual, Matt with me.
Hey everyone, my name is Matt. I have worked with Pat in the past, and right now we're working together to bring these insights on YouTube production, YouTube optimizations, and just overall the creator journey. I'm here specifically with a known agenda, and as my main job, I work for a Superside where I help clients figure out what is the kind of creative challenge that they need to solve and what is the right solution for that, whether it's Superside or something else. And on the side, I do have my own YouTube channel right now where I'm myself trying to implement all those tips that we're going to be touching on with Pat, from branding to technicalities, setup, SEO, and everything. So that's what you can expect from my end.
Today, we are reviewing two channels. This is the first one. Let us start with performance medicine as a channel. So what we typically have a look at when we review channels like this one is overall branding of the channel, consistency with the content, the niche, and so on and so forth. So for this channel, I have a couple of thoughts. In terms of branding, this is already well positioned. Performance medicine, we have a tagline for optimal health. What I have an issue with is like one thing, if we look at the channel from top to bottom, is the channel icon. It says stay educated, stay healthy, which is nice if you look at the channel directly, right? However, if you search the content on YouTube, or if a content anywhere on YouTube is being looked at, the channel icon is way too small to even be able to read educated and stay healthy. For example, I did a search for one of the videos already, and you can see the icon you can see that there's text there. However, you cannot really comprehend what the text says here. Right? So the icon is way too small. And instead of having random text here that is very small and pixelated, I'd rather have them the icon itself, which is recognizable. Even better would be maybe a face, like someone who's recurring. So on this specific channel, I think Dr. Tom Rogers is a freaking person. But as far as I understand the niche and the channel's overall content strategy, we have multiple hosts here, which is fine. That's why it's okay to also have the icon as the channel avatar. Anything to add on to that, Matt?
No, not really. From my end, just the overall look of it, look and feel. I understand, where the doctor is coming from, where his team is coming from, is consistent overall. But to me, yeah, it's a bit overloaded in terms of visuals and aesthetics. YouTube typically works best with lean thumbnails that are really just one or two words, whereas these branded elements are kind of distracting the attention. So that's my first impression.
Yeah, I was about to say that as well, because if we think about YouTube videos, we want to sell the idea of watching the video. So this is what I remember our clients of, is that once we have our niche defined, then we have to sell the idea of every individual video. Overall, for those videos, I definitely agree with you that they are overcrowded. It's all over the place in terms of branding. We have explained this, which seems to be a series. And then we have the logo itself. We have the person's name here. And I think that's definitely too much information for anyone. So what's good on this channel is that the niche is defined. We have topics that are trendy, like GLP-1 medications, for example. However, we could potentially improve that by just giving the viewer an information, what is this video all about. So we have GLP-1 myths, which by itself might be interesting, but we could make it even more interesting, like the most common GLP-1 myths. Maybe people even are not familiar with GLP-1. And I know in the medical space, GLP-1 is the semaglutide.
Glucagon-like peptide one. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's it called? Like what is this? What are we calling this? Is
I think
this
it's an
the
enzyme, no? No, I
enzyme?
mean, it's a hormone, yeah.
It's a
GLP-1.
hormone. Okay. So GLP-1 is the hormone, but people are potentially more familiar with the buzzword Ozempic. We can mention GLP-1 in the title, for example, but then like maybe the dangers of weight control Ozempic, weight control medication Ozempic, for example. But that's one thing. What I definitely noticed is once we click on the video itself, I noticed that in the beginning we have quite a long intro logo.
Yeah, it is super long.
So, and it's explained this, right? It's like 6 seconds. And then we have the medical disclaimer, which is fine if you really need that. But I think the medical disclaimer could be also said in the beginning of the intro, potentially before we give them the information. I think it's too early to give this medical disclaimer here. Instead, I would start with an intro that is like scroll stopping, very incentivizing, a hook incentivizing the episode. In this episode, we are going to discuss GLP-1 myths. We have 5 myths for you or something like that. Just make sure that people are in the right place, right? And then you can continue with, hey, we're at Performance Medicine. If you like medical information from whatever from a trusted source, whatever the branding is here, right? And then obviously I watched a little bit more of the episode. And then we have 2 hosts basically, and they start off with, hey, how's the weather? How's it going? Whatever. Like they have kind of like their own banter, which isn't ideal for content because I'm here for information. And if I clicked on the video, I don't want to waste my time with whatever they have going on in their lives. Yeah. So that's that's kind of like my opinion on that. And yeah,
Essentially, you don't really have time to figure out, like, in these first few minutes, whether you want to listen to a 21-minute conversation because you just yet don't know what you're going to take away from this conversation. And so even though the title speaks to that a little, honestly, I do have sort of like a podcast red flag on YouTube. It may be just my generation, but just from like a cover image, I can confidently tell that it's going to be a podcast, right? And then I see the 21-minute mark next to
yeah,
it. And I'm
yeah.
like, I'm not going to click, right? Because it does feel like it's going to be a podcast. And if it's so obviously packaged that way, I think it can turn in with viewers unless you already have a large following who have been following you, I don't know, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and they just find you on YouTube as well.
Or if it's really good, well incentivized. If I'm like, it really depends on the state of mind of the viewer, right? Because if you potentially prefer shorter videos, right, but maybe there's like this need of knowing more about GLP-1 medication. So if I'm in research mode, right, and I see GLP-1 myths, right, and I want to really explore this topic, I might even tune into GLP medication. Obviously, I will choose shorter videos first. But if I want to do like an in-depth research, I want to really dive deeper in this conversation of GLP-1 medication. However, like as I said, the first 15 seconds don't really sell me the idea, and then they continue their banter on like generally like how's it going and everything. That's kind of like not, I don't feel that they address the overall topic well enough for me to stay. I'd rather click on something that is kind of like maybe in the suggested area here, right? You can clearly see that we have, let's say, also like a 22. That's actually not related to that, but let me see.
There is one with like Brian Johnson, an hour, 41 minutes.
Yeah, we have, for example, like, yeah, exactly. Ozempic is just the start, right? Brian Johnson, 144,000 views, and it's an hour and 41 minutes long. So I'd rather click on another video like here, like this one. Once I click on the video, I know exactly what I can expect from the next 1.5 hours.
Yeah, you'll live forever, basically. And it's with the
So,
old buff guy.
so overall, great topic, great niche, but we need to work on the intro here. Anything to add on this channel specifically?
Yeah, from my end. So I think, I'm not sure like how you see, but they, first of all, I love the Southern accent. It's very clear that, we're deep in the South in the US, which I think, I don't know, just has a sweet spot for me. Overall, the format is wholesome, especially like if you're looking at the videos. But sometimes
Yeah.
it's too wholesome for me, especially because it's just the banter in the beginning takes away the focus from what the topic is going to be. And as a channel that's still about to be discovered, I think it explains to a certain degree why the views have been lacking in the last year or so, right? It's just too low for the episodes to kick in. That is definitely one issue I see. People will click away and it will cause the videos to tank. That's one very clear
Yeah.
indicator there. Also, it's very clear to me that it's an audio format originally and not something tuned for YouTube. Sometimes, for example, when they're sitting on the chairs, for example, the lipid panels, I don't know. I'm used to looking at podcasts where people are very confident where they're sitting, just like us, for example. We're sitting
Yeah.
here. I'm not sitting on a chair, just leaning over and just really, I'm about to get going. But rather, I have the time and I'm talking about the things that interest me. So I think maybe, I'm not sure about their studio setup and studio situation or something, but if they could make it more comfortable, it would come through also the screen.
Kind of like a laid back, hey, I'm having a real conversation on this topic. However, I'm discussing it together comfortably instead of being like very stiff in front of the camera.
Yeah. And also, if you look at like what performed best on this channel in the past, it is very clear that it was a super niche channel focusing on like these very niche things like methylene blue. Okay, taurine is
Yeah.
not that much that way, but fenbendazole, artemisinin, these are like very
Yeah.
random things overall. And it showed that the channel thrived when this was the focus. And probably when they switched into the more generic medical topics, it's diluted the content and how YouTube looks at the channel and how it understands what this channel is about. So honestly, like a year ago, having more than 400K views versus today uploading consistently, they have a few hundred views. I think it's a very big drop. And
Yeah.
there should be a question raised in like, how can we reproduce this kind of success and what was the reason for that success?
Yeah. So I have actually a lot to say about this and the previous thing that you've mentioned about the focus on the different topics. We have clearly topics that can be researched. So if I heard about methylene blue on a podcast, I will go ahead and research this topic, and potentially I will find this very topic in top of my results, right? And so they kind of like had the idea of discussing those individual, like very niche, as you mentioned, substances, let's call it like that. But at some point they ran out of those substances to discuss. What can you discuss even more about this, right? You can do a part 2, you can discuss it another time, which isn't a bad idea overall, because maybe there's new research about a certain substance after a year. So whatever works for them, I would just continue repeating it, keep creating new content on that topic. However, with an updated mindset. But you can only do methylene blue like once a quarter, maybe, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it works for you, I would say it's easy to replicate. It's easy to add maybe additional information about that. That's a good strategy for this channel. But for the newer content, so this one is very specific and can be kind of like, if I'm in the research phase of this substance, right? I will watch this and I will potentially find it in the search results. But for those topics that are more like overall discussing it here, kind of like discussions. So we have to consider one thing, because we have a drop in views. What got them there with the old content is probably not the right strategy for the new content with more people in it, right? They potentially have a lot of views from existing content, which is great, but they have to like reconsider how they position their content right now. And we have to also think in terms of why are people choosing to watch content? 80% of views from content like this will potentially be from browse, meaning that they have absolutely no context of what the channel is all about. They have never heard about the channel. So we clearly have to give them an incentive once they click on the video to continue watching the video. And this is what I explained here. Obviously, this is like just a very brief overview of the channel. But that's it in terms of what I have to say about this channel. Yeah. Can we go over
One
to...
quick question. Do you want
Yeah,
to, or like I have a question to you here? Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
we're talking about a lot. podcasts. And, Trauma Rewired is something that, we recently started working on. And just like, what do you see as like the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to trying to adapt the podcast format to YouTube? Maybe they have a following already, on like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or somewhere else. Maybe a couple 10,000 or so listeners every month. What is the right way to transition?
So I think the top mistake is they don't make it YouTube specific. So they don't have an intro and they assume like YouTube is a discovery platform, right? And a podcast platform where you already have people who are listening, who subscribe to you. It is a relational platform. So this is the big difference here. So we have to do content that is specific for YouTube where I might log in and never subscribe to a channel, but I will watch the episodes, like for example, Joe Rogan, right? I might be watching Joe Rogan and never subscribe to Joe Rogan just because he has popular guests, right? So in terms of designing your content for YouTube specifically, there are a couple of things that you can consider, which is first of all, have an intro or a preview of the episode. And ideally, you have a preview of the episode with a very punchy thing, right? So maybe in minute 50, there was a conversation that was very deep and very click worthy. I'd rather prefer click worthy, like kind of something that I'm anticipating. Oh, I really need to hear this, right? Something maybe controversial, depending on the niche, right? So something that they can anticipate in the episode. And then once you start the episode, you have to have the full context of what is going to be discussed in the episode. So let's say we have GLP-1 medications, right? Or we have financial trauma, right? A recent episode that I reviewed on Trauma Rewired was financial trauma. We want to give them context of what is the benefit of watching the full episode. So for example, it could be, hey, in this episode, we are going to discuss a topic that everyone struggles with. Even though you have financial security because you've built your career and you have job security, but you still might struggle because of some trauma from childhood. So this could be a good intro to introduce the topic. And I feel then, okay, this is something for me because maybe I have that. Like I feel like financially insecure, even though I know for a fact, like I have financial stability, but even though I still struggle with spending money on something that might be a luxury or something that I really want, but I don't want to spend money on. So this would be my long-winded answer to your question. What should we consider? What should we do when transitioning from an audio platform only to YouTube? And then, of course, always have this idea in the back of your mind that people never heard about you. So they need to be convinced with the thumbnail. The thumbnail is like a door that if you see a shady door, you don't want to open it, right? If you see a beautiful door that you want to, oh, that's interesting. What is it that is hiding behind the door? But you need to incentivize, like maybe there's a bakery or something, like something that attracts them to go inside. This is how I view YouTube thumbnails. And then maybe there's a description. The title serves as a description for 70% of the clicks will happen because of the thumbnail. And then like some people are like, do I really want to open the door? And this will be the description, homemade cookies or something like that. And that will be the title of the video. And then once I see, okay, do I want a cookie right now? A homemade cookie? Sounds good. I'm opening the door, right? All right, we have another channel. Anything you can say about this channel?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, as I mentioned in the intro, I most look at things from a branding perspective and also just common sense to a degree, and also just like my production experience with doing my own on YouTube channel. Now, I think it's very apparent that, Dr. Hussein has a niche figured out. She definitely has an affinity. When you click on the video, you can see that it is well thought out. She fits the persona that she's playing here. What's interesting is that actually her brand on a first look is better than the video quality, I think, right now. The reason being is you jump in, for example, the first video, triple feeding tips, and it's very vocal without much graphics to support that kind of conversation she's having with the audience. Outside a few bullet points that pop up mid-conversation, it's 12-minute, talking head video, which otherwise could work in a more defined niche. But I think overall pediatrics and even like mom tips and all this kind of topic has very well fleshed out content in YouTube. So the niche in which she is competing is a problem in comparison to like what she puts into the production. Now, I think one struggle with many first time creators is that they don't, or they either don't or can manage their time efficiently. You know, a lot of people can either stretch out the pre-production and get frustrated that, oh my God, I still haven't produced anything. And then they jump into so that they can produce something finally. And then they do the post-production, which also they don't want it to take too much time. And it sort of like becomes that drawing with the horse, you know,
Yeah.
initial 80% of the horse is very well drawn and the rest 20% is crap. And I think for her, it's very tricky because she's a doctor, she's a mom, she probably has a ton of other things, and she also needs to create content. So for her, I think probably to continue producing content, time is of the essence. And it's the biggest hurdle I would probably suspect she has.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that what I agree with you is I really like the branding. You can see also the development, like compared to older content, right? So you can see kind of like it changed over time, but now she kind of like figured out the colors that she wants to go with, the blue. What I would definitely change here is, you know, obviously she's branding her channel in the thumbnail, right? We have like pediatrician explains, and it always starts like pediatrician explains, pediatrician answers. So that's kind of like what she's trying to do, but this isn't the place to brand the topic, right? What she can do is in the video explain, hey, I'm a pediatrician and I'm discussing topics like breastfeeding or caring for your newborn or whatever, breastfeeding in general, marijuana and breastfeeding, whatever the topic is, right? So she should convince, again, the door analogy, I need to be able to recognize, okay, this video is for me. I'm a mother, I'm a young mother, and I want to watch the type of content, and the thumbnail needs to convince me to click on the video and then watch the full episode. And what she does is like, it's really wholesome, like how she creates the content. Like she starts off like, hey, I'm Amna Hussein. I'm Dr. Amna Hussein. And it's really, she's very likable. However, like she doesn't address the topic right away. And what she could benefit from is having someone who tells her like how should she start the episode. So someone who specifically says like, okay, the triple feeding topic is great, right? And then prepares maybe like an intro, like in this episode we are going to discuss triple feeding. This is a question that I get a lot in my clinic or whatever, like hospital, wherever she works. And also as a mom, I have experience in that. So that's kind of like where I would start with this conversation. Instead, she introduces herself, which is already good because it shows expertise and her authority. But ideally, we introduce the topic and then kind of like continue. Hey, in case you don't know me, I'm Amna Hussein and I cover topics like this on this channel, and then make sure to subscribe or whatever that you want to, right? Clearly, this channel is also an educational channel that graduates. And I really love the niche overall that she's in because, you know, you have a newborn, and in my opinion, she should focus on a lot like on newborn stuff. So that once people are hooked in, they really like the information, then she can continue in creating content in like more adult phases of life. Yeah.
Dude is looking at it like primitive.
Yeah,
you know,
it's kind of like,
primitive channel.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, Bob Ross, right?
Yeah.
You start drawing and then you really want to explore different techniques, and you just watch this guy because he's interesting, right? And the same happens here, right?
No, I've been
And you can
cheering on, you know, the primitive technology channel, you know, the OG one, for the guy to progress into Bronze Age. You know, you have that channel, no? Where the guy, without saying a single word, he is the OG primitive technology channel. He's like 12, 13 million. He doesn't say a single word. It's only like subtitles explaining what he's doing, but he never said a single word. And he is doing like authentic stuff in Australia. And, you know, I've been cheering. I've been a huge nerd, you know, playing with Age of Empires and stuff. And I've been like, when is this guy going to advance to Bronze Age and then Iron Age and stuff? And it's just like, you know, it's never happening because there's just so much stuff to do. And it's like what you mentioned is kind of that, you know, I love the newborn stuff, but I can't wait to, you know, until the kid gets 5 or something. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, it is funny. Like it's kind of like with all those educational type of channels are like whatever the thing that you want to describe. For example, for me, the channel could be like Pat Flynn, for example. He's very catered towards beginners, right? Beginner entrepreneurs. And you really have to realize, okay, do you want to stay in that niche or do you want to expand, right? So for me, as someone who already is active, the beginner stuff might be too beginnery, right? And at some point, I want to explore other channels. And this is kind of like the graduation type of issue that I have that we can potentially have with channels like that, where it's like, but yeah, at some point, like the breastfeeding mother will have teenager issues and maybe she will turn to her. Maybe there's another channel that she can create like specifically on that, but definitely she will be like the authority that she will get a lot of views from people who trust her.
From a branding perspective, I have one thing to add here, which I think would actually make the channel better. So as a doctor, if you just put your name, and I would say Dr. Matt Maitan on YouTube, while it tells people that I may or may not be a doctor, because you can be a chiropractor and stuff like that, adding what your specialty is, I think it can help bring in views. So if I were to see Dr. Amna Hussein post a video or something, if I see that she's a pediatrician or somebody who shares mom tips, I would know immediately whether I'm the right audience for this particular video. So I think in her case, it actually could help if it would say Dr. Amna Hussein, pediatric tips, or like tips for newborns. I don't know. But just overall for the branding, it wouldn't change too much away from the fact that she's a doctor, but it would add depth and like clarity.
Yeah, I think generally it can help if you state that. Just would be careful with how long the name is. It needs to be very punchy, right? Maybe pediatrics, positive pediatrics, or something like that is brandable that I can remember, right? So that will be. But at the same time, yeah, I think one thing, if we add that, so it definitely limits us in terms of niche. So as long as we want to stay in the pediatrician niche, that's okay. But if we want to expand at some point, I think you can't go wrong with just Dr. Amna Hussein, right? And then, yeah, I think what I really like is the, avatar, obviously, she's smiling. And yeah, generally, like the topics are really great, but I would definitely work on how she structures the video in the beginning and then how she leads into the topic. And then if I would just comment thumbnails itself, you can see pediatrician explains, which is nice, but I would be rather interested in having the triple feeding tips bigger on the thumbnail to explain like this is the topic of the video. Or I can make it even more interesting by explaining, triple feeding tips for mothers who, struggle with like whatever the topic is of the video.
Yeah, visually it could be much clearer. Even the pediatrician explains or pediatrician answers. What's interesting, I think, on the channel is like the difference between the long format content and the short format content. I think the short format content is a bit out of place for me sometimes because she has this kind of funny content where she's doing these, not duets, but, voiceovers and she's just acting things out. If she doesn't have as much time to create long format content, I think dialing down on like actual tips and like the professional part of what she does, just simply in a shorter format, I think that's great. I think the funny version is a bit confusing because if people like the funny content, they will probably not like the long format content and vice versa probably. So I think it confuses somewhat the channel's purpose and like what she wants to do with the channel overall.
Yeah, I mean, if we think of YouTube Shorts similar to TikTok or any other platform that has like a for you section, right? I will be kind of like interested in this type of topic for the entertainment, but not for the information. So as you mentioned, it might dilute a little bit the brand here, right? But obviously YouTube Shorts can get you a lot of views and a lot of exposure. That might percentage-wise, maybe like 10% or something, will translate into people who are actually viewing this. But maybe, I'm not sure exactly what the content is. I haven't watched everything, but if she adds value as a pediatrician, I can say, then it's
you can check out the first video. It's very different. Or the top video she had.
So yeah, so if it's like, yeah, okay. So this is clearly not off-brand. So I would be really, I mean, it's funny, or it could be funny for people who are watching that type of content, but I would definitely like reconsider it in terms of what to post here. I think that overall this suits kind of like the TikTok narrative, and I think this is actually the repost. It's reposted from TikTok, and it could also definitely works for Instagram Reels, but on YouTube itself, it's primarily educational platform.
Yeah.
Anything to add? Any questions from your end?
Not really. I think we covered most of the stuff here. Yeah, I think what makes or breaks her channel is really just how she manages time. I think, as we see in the last 2 months, she didn't post new content. Could be because just she has a lot of commitment. And I think as like creators starting out, having at least 10 hours a week to produce videos, do everything is crucial. And I know it can be tricky when you have other commitments. So I think the main question right now for her is like what her goal is with the channel and how she wants to continue it, and just evaluate according like what resources she can put next to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if you have any channels that we should review next time, let us know in the comments. It was great talking to you. It was great reviewing channels, and see you guys in the next one.
See you in the next one.